Good afternoon and welcome to the Arlington County Board's work session, the first of our capital improvement plan work sessions. Today is May 25th, 2021. I will hand it over to the manager. We're going to have discussion today of our capital improvement plan as it relates to stormwater, utilities, public safety, and technology services. We have quite a few slides that staff is going to help us through. And I know that at least one board colleague has a 5:30 hard stop this afternoon. We'll see if we can get through as much as possible. Two quick notes as we start. They're very different notes, but I want to make them just for context. Our rolling 7-day average of cases of COVID-19 is 3 in Arlington over the past week. So that is some good news. And I'll just say that 1 year ago today, the murder of George Floyd happened. And we have all been called to a bit of a reckoning as to what we want to be as a nation and as a state and as Arlington as a result. So somber note, but I think it's worth sharing. And there's no easy or good or appropriate segue, but I have to make one. So we will go to the manager as we turn to our capital improvement plan in the first of 3 work sessions. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. We have a lot of material to get through today, and I would just highlight that though we have a somewhat constrained CIP, as I noted in my manager's message, this is again, like the operating budget, a transition CIP from the 1-year CIP we had last year to hopefully a 10-year CIP next year. And you can see the fruits of the previous CIPs in our community as we move towards opening the Long Branch Aquatics Facility and the Lubber Run Community Center. We're going to start off with an area where we've made a lot of focus and effort, stormwater. And I'll turn it over to a really awesome employee, Demetra McBride. Demetra?
Ms. McBride.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to the board and to the public. I am going to be co-presenting this proposal today with Krista Bell, the Stormwater Program's fiscal agent. Krista is actually going to go through the, that is not my child. Krista is going to be going through the exact project profiles as well as the fiscals. But before we get into that, can I have the next slide, please? We wanted to lay the groundwork for what goes into this proposal as well as what goes into informing the program and our projects. As the board and the public are aware, there's significant and diverse demand on the program. We have a very large system that is being taxed by increasing volatility of storms and, of course, the projections for future climate change. In addition, we seek to elevate the state of good repair for the infrastructure itself. We have significant regulatory requirements on both a federal as well as a state level and across the water quality and stream restoration program, as well as the capacity program. These are not fixed, they are escalating regulatory requirements. So this last bullet here, this last thumbnail, really speaks to the analyses, the assessments, the strategic planning, the studies, and the tools that go into not only informing the program and the projects, but the CIP proposal, all rolling up to support the overarching goals and principles of the program, which are to create high performance programs and projects on a cost-effective basis that have resiliency over the long term or ensure resiliency and also mitigate risk over the long term. Next, please. All of you have seen this graphic before. It's being used today merely to demonstrate not just the tools that we use, but how we use them. This is an accounting of historic data over time in the past 6 to 7 years with repetitive flood and repetitive risk and loss that has informed or shown us where our vulnerability watersheds are. That's historical data. It's also being updated on a constant basis, but not just updated. We're not just designing a program or projects or a CIP for today, for the challenges of today, but also for projected challenges into the next several decades. And that is going to be informed by the data that we will be receiving under the ramp. Next slide, please. We're really pleased to report to the board and the public that, as the county manager has indicated, with the support of the board and the support of the community, we have a number of key projects underway. In active design is phase 1, or what we are looking at as an anchor project for the Spout Run watershed solution. That has taken not longer because we haven't been working diligently at it, but there have been new emerging opportunities for overland relief, property acquisition, but more importantly, the potential for public-private partnerships in that area. And we are meeting with the civic associations for the Spout Run watershed in early June. Also, we have the 4 Mile Run dredging project. That's a collaboration with the city of Alexandria, a longstanding one in partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We have the now newly named Cardinal Detention Vault, School Detention Vault, previously the Reed Detention Vault. This, as you know, is an unprecedented partnership between the schools, APS, and the Stormwater program. It also signals a new opportunity and a focus on co-siting projects and multi-purposing of public lands. Phase 1 is on schedule, is going to be complete before school starts at the end of the summer. We also anticipate the completion of 100% designs for phase 2, the vault itself, this summer, and we'll be moving into construction in the early fall with a completion in fall winter of next year. Donaldson Run Trib B, as you know, has a long history of not only design, but ground truthing, vetting, and quality control assessment of the design, as well as repetitive and very lively and very significant public engagement. The purchasing process and contracting is concluded. We'll be moving into construction soon with completion spring of 22, and Ballston Pond is in active procurement. We also have the potential first land acquisition under the Stormwater Capacity Program. This property is in Crossman Run and is part of the multi-phase solution. And we also have the risk assessment and management plan. This plan required us also, we didn't anticipate to have to complete a number of data sets and ground truth a number of assets in the system, but is moving forward rapidly. We will soon be launching the vulnerability assessments, and in the early fall, we'll be launching the risk assessments. All the key deliverables will be completed by the end of this calendar year with a gaps analysis and the final summary report in Q1 of 22. Next, please. And all of this is just a very brief summary way to let you have a view into the chefs in the kitchen and the tools and ingredients that we use for the program, the projects, as well as the CIP proposal along these 3 different buckets of the program, which are the capacity system, the water quality requirements, and also our capital maintenance and infrastructure, which is such a timely issue nationwide today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Krista.
Thanks, Demetra. As she mentioned, the CIP is broken out into 3 program areas: the maintenance capital, streams and water quality, and capacity improvements. This slide shows a graphical comparison of the program and the associated funding. For the 3-year CIP, there's a total of $96 million in planned improvements. As you can see, the capacity improvements are a large priority for the program, and they comprise about 70% of the total CIP. While last year's CIP was technically only a 1-year CIP, we did include the 10-year look to put the November 2020 bond referenda into context. So much of what you'll see in this year's 3-year CIP is not new. The big change is the expansion and the increase for the Cardinal School Detention project, where we're leveraging the opportunity with APS to enhance our stormwater capacity in the Torreyson watershed. On the funding side, the program is funded through a variety of sources, including the Sanitary District tax, funding down existing fund balance. However, the primary portion, about 80%, is funded from bonds. Next slide. This slide shows our forecasted bond funding needs. Over the 3-year CIP, we're planning to issue bonds which were approved by the voters at the November 2020 referenda. However, based on the scale of the program and the improvements planned, additional funding for the program is necessary, and we're projecting that we would bring another referenda to the county board and to the voters in fall of 2022 for subsequent bond issuances. Next slide. This slide shows a listing of our capacity improvement projects. These projects are aimed at increasing or expanding the capacity of the stormwater system through blended engineering, meaning it could use a combination of techniques including detention, pipe improvements, tertiary asset installation, and overland relief. The total for the program is $65.4 million for the 3 years, and I'll detail a couple of the major projects in the next slides. For Spout Run, this is the first phase of the eventual 3 planned phases to improve the Spout Run watershed stormwater capacity. As Demetra mentioned earlier, it is the anchor project for this watershed. It's currently in design with detention planned underneath Woodstock Park, which would dual purpose the parkland. Next is the Cardinal Elementary School detention project, which is a joint project with schools to dual purpose the grassy fields as well as the ball fields. And the project, as Demetra mentioned earlier, is broken into 2 phases. The pictures on the left reflect our phase 1 construction, and the second phase, which would be the actual detention, is currently under design. Next. Next, we move into our stream and water quality program. We show the project listing for the 3-year CIP period. This program includes projects to repair damaged streams and infrastructure and has a heavy focus on reducing water pollution to comply with our MS4 permit requirements. In the 3-year CIP, there are planning studies for the MS4 permit compliance, resilient streams, and green infrastructure, which will serve to inform future projects and maximize effective and efficient use of funds to meet permit compliance requirements. Next slide. The Donaldson Red Tributary B project will stabilize the stream's eroding banks to protect existing stream valley infrastructure, including the threatened water main and sanitary sewer, which cross the stream and run parallel to it. The project also includes repair of 4 failed storm sewer outfalls. It will reconstruct and protect the Zachary Taylor Park pedestrian and bicycle pathway and add under trail drainage. The contract for this project was approved by the county board at the March meeting, and construction is planned to get underway shortly with expected completion in spring of 2022. The next project is the Ballston Pond Retrofit, which will provide stormwater treatment for over 460 acres in the Lever Run watershed. The project is among the county's most effective opportunities to achieve its water quality objectives and meet its regulatory requirements under the Chesapeake Bay, TMDL, and the MS4 permit. This project utilizes some state DEQ grant funding. The construction contract will be coming to the county board for approval at the June board meeting. Expected completion date is spring of 2023. And finally, we move to the maintenance capital program, which focuses on rehab and replacement of existing system assets. As Demetra mentioned, the risk assessment and management plan, the RAMP, will wrap up this fall or winter, and it's a critical planning component for the maintenance capital section. I'll cover 2 of our larger projects in the next couple slides. The 4 Mile Run Dredging project is a collaborative project with the City of Alexandria to fill our requirements with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It's expected we'll bring the contract to the county board in September, with construction starting thereafter and wrapping up in late spring of 2022. The Dumbarton Culverts project encompasses both the upstream and the downstream culverts. Culverts are planned to be replaced due to their poor condition, significant deterioration, and a numerous amount of repairs that have been necessary, as you can see in the bottom picture. Additionally, during flooding, they overtop during significant storm events, as you can see in the top picture. The project is currently under design. To minimize neighborhood disruption, it's planned to be done in conjunction with water main improvements planned for the same area. Construction completion is planned for spring of 2023. With that, I'll turn it back over to Demetra to wrap us up.
Thank you, Krista. In wrapping, we wanted to bring attention to two main sets of impactors on the CIP. One is, of course, our Ms4 compliance. As the board is aware, we met our first permit benchmark and slightly exceeded it. The second Ms4 permit, even though the first ended in 2018, there was a delay in the process at the state level. It is currently at the end of its public comment period, so we anticipate comfortably that the second permit will be live and in force by July 1st of 2021, this coming fiscal year. That requires an additional 35% improvement for an accrual of 40% pollutant reduction over the 5-year permitted cycle. Under the current proposal that we have for both the 3-year and in order, again, to remain strategic and high performance and cost effective focused, we do a 10-year CIP always. So we anticipate that during this 5-year cycle, the projects that we have proposed for the full 5 years are going to be sufficient to meet this requirement. If there is a shortfall, it's going to be de minimis and easily bridged by purchasing credits from the water pollution treatment plant. As Krista mentioned earlier, we are going to be undertaking in FY22 a strategic compliance study. This is really to optimize not just what we're doing, but we can do, but we're already doing in order to broaden the toolkit or the portfolio of recognized compliance activities so that we can make the case to the state in preparation for the third permit, which requires a highly escalated 60% pollution reduction. Next slide. And of course, the entire program is informed by the Stormwater Master Plan originally adopted in 1957, several updates, the most recent in 2014. This official element of the county's comprehensive plan. Typically, we would update these every 5 to 6 years. We have intentionally been holding a little bit of that adoption back, working on the main points, but holding back until we have all of the data and scenarios and mapping from the risk assessment, as well as the active launch of LDA 2.0, which has really expanded the toolkit of compliance with the land disturbance activity ordinance and program. The stormwater interdepartmental working groups, which were formed under direction from the manager at the end of 2019 in response to the historic storm in July of that year, had 4 committees. 3 of the committees, the emergency prep and response communications and the expanded blended engineering design, are already in deployment or are close to being installed in terms of the sensors under the first committee for emergencies. The 4th policy committee has returned a recommendation for a flood resilient design and construction guidelines manual. This is intended as a voluntary manual, but it was a strong recommendation. It's currently being scoped. We expect to go out for procurement later on this year. Again, the feasibility study for testing other alternative funding mechanisms and this urban flooding focus. Over the past 2 decades, depending on where you are in the United States, 70 to 80% of the flooding, extreme flooding impact has been actually outside the FEMA floodplains. So FEMA and state governments have grown to recognize this as a formal term, that urban flooding is the current primary challenge. The state has even reacted, quite surprisingly, this past session with a modest but very significant flood disclosure bill. And we're also looking at market factors and the public-private roles. Public-private is really an issue that came into clear focus again in that historic storm. We consider it the government's goal is to try and avoid flooding, particularly significant flooding in homes and building structures and businesses. But there are also elements that the private sector can undertake, not just simply to harden their private property against flooding, but also to ensure high marketability, insurability, and value for their businesses and their homes. And with that, we're going to close and entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. McBride and Ms. Abel, Demetria and Krista, thank you so much. I will check with colleagues to see if you have any questions. And as you're considering, if you do, I'll just start with one, which is the president went to FEMA yesterday, and I know that infrastructure is your focus. Is there any component to which you could, and maybe it might even be Mr. Emanuel, if you can just talk. We're projected to have another heavy rain season, and wondered if you could sort of at a high level talk about steps. Most of these projects would be projected to finish well outside of this season, but is there a high level description that you might do of the steps that we would do for flood resiliency and prevention? That's operating more than capital, but is there a high level short description you could do to that? I don't know if it's one of you or Mr. Emanuel, perhaps Mr. Schwartz, very briefly.
If I could just quickly, I believe, answer, and I'm sorry if there's an echo. These projects that we brought forward in that list of projects that are in progress, I mentioned that they are not exhaustive, they're symbolic. So we have been taking and executing a number of capacity interim projects that have been strategically located for, really targeted, but quite significant or impactful flooding. So those are being completed as well as capital maintenance projects that will alleviate flooding in some of those places. The federal government, the administration did go to FEMA. There are going to be funds that are going to be available. They'll be highly competitive. We are also scoping out state funds that are going to be available both under the SLAF grants. Now, those are going to focus on water quality, but remember that we're aggressive in pursuing all alternative funding because of the way the financing works. If we're able to gain alternative funding in one area, it helps us in the other areas. So there's the SLAF grants, and the state has not only increased the annual amount of those of that fund, but they've appropriated, as I understand, the monies to fund it this year. Unfortunately, last year, COVID prevented that. And in addition, as the board is probably aware, the state legislature and the governor undertook to earmark 45% of the funds received from the RGGI cap and trade participation towards flood mitigation projects. And we're following that manual. It's currently the guidelines manual is being vetted, and we hope to be in a position to apply for those funds as well.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. We'll go to questions from colleagues. As we do with flood resilience and mitigation, we should say again for our public that flood prevention is in these difficult times with the storm season ahead is categorical prevention is not feasible. And so resilience and prevention to the maximum extent is what we seek. Mr. Karantonis.
Mr. Chair, I believe Ms. Crystal was really before me.
Okay.
Otherwise, I can launch my question, but I really believe that's Crystal.
I was nothing too time sensitive, so please go ahead.
So I have two questions. One is I would like to understand a little bit better the financial part of this. There are, if I understand correctly, so we are looking at two bond referenda covering these expenses in 23 and 24. Is 22, 23, and 24? Is that correct? Three, actually.
We have the current referenda where we would be issuing bonds from. That was approved last fall. We would do the next referenda would cover the needs for FY23 and 24.
So what governs our thinking about how we distribute the financial impact of that to different referenda years? What is the leading philosophy here about on this?
So for the for FY22, when we brought the proposed tax rate increase to the board for the FY22 budget, it was with the understanding that that increase would cover our needs for both FY22 and 23, and then there would be a future rate or utility fee increase needed to cover the additional needs of the program. So for the CIP, we strove to live within those constraints of what we can manage and what we can design and get forward to construction, but then also what we could afford. And it looks like Mr. Schwartz has a comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, it's a supplement. It's well done, Krista. But you know, Mr. Carantonis, our approach has always been, and this is a very unusual year where we're actually going to the voters for bonds. We do it every other year, and we size our request based on estimated flows of cash needs associated with projects over the next 2 years. And sometimes even a little further beyond that. The best place to look, which I do not have handy right now, is in the when the board authorizes us to sell bonds, which I think that happened at the April meeting. We have a very long compendium of the years that bonds were authorized, when they were sold, amounts remaining for each of them, and the reasons behind that. So be happy to go into further detail on that.
I guess also a determinant is our debt service, you know, and you know, maintaining our AAA rating, correct?
Yes, I mean, we are dealing with multiple constraints under our financial policies, which include the 10% of our general fund budget being no more than that being used for debt service. And as we pointed out this year, that is not the constraint we're operating under. Our constraint is actually making sure we do not increase the operating budget beyond that, which I think we determine is supportable as we head into the next budget season.
Okay, understood. Thank you for that. And a quick technical question as on a different topic. The Woodstock Park detention vault. Am I correct that this is a smaller cistern, a smaller facility than the Cardinal, retention vault, the Cardinal School, the former Reed School retention vault?
Currently, it is somewhat smaller, but it is deeper because of the different space availability. We are looking at being able to alleviate the depth somewhat by possible expansion into some areas, but that really is a discussion with parks in the community that we've just, you know, literally thought of, so we need to have. And also this is an area where we're hoping there may be other opportunities such as public-private partnerships that may complement or supplement the volume of the vault in Woodstock Park.
The reason why I'm asking is why is it so much more expensive than the Cardinal, than the vault that we are that is right now in construction over in Westover?
We're certainly happy to go into greater detail in a direct briefing with the board, but the simple and most direct answer is that it is deeper, so it requires a pump. And we were able to rely on gravity at the Cardinal School.
Yeah,
okay.
If I could just add, Board Member Cartonis, the pumps are going to add additional cost. And when you get that deep, it could be up to 25 to 28 feet deep. We have to pump water for construction. It's a whole different level of excavation. So that adds to the cost to just supplement what Demetra was saying.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carantonis. Ms. Crystal.
I thought the answer might be that we're already digging at that site, but it sounds like it's actually a more mechanical one. Thank you so much. One just really clarifying question, and then a bigger one, which is first, can you remind us that this Cardinal Elementary School detention site facility, which watershed is served by that? I know we talked a lot about the flooding in Westover, but is that a different watershed than Spout Run altogether?
Actually, we've been fortunate in that not totally, but to some great extent, we've been able to merge the solution, the multi-phase solution for both the Torresen Run and Westover districts. It's called Westover, right there next to the school, but technically the school is in the Torrison Run watershed.
Okay, and Westover. Thank you. I think we've all learned a lot about watershed level problems, and so I want to make sure I'm connecting the solutions to the right watershed. So you were mentioning, Ms. McBride, just in passing, public-private partnerships, and so I wanted to talk just briefly about funding sources in particular, compared to, for example, the utilities fund, which we'll see in a couple of slides, where developer contributions make up some feature of the revenue sources for those projects. These generally are financed by bonds, especially, and I think those who saw the big bond referendum last year and may see another one again, will have some intuitive grasp on that. But one of the things that I've heard come up quite a bit recently with stakeholders along Lee Highway in context of Plan Lee Highway is this sort of interest or questions about, what does it mean when we talk about community benefits related to stormwater management? This may be kind of a big philosophical question for undertaking with that planning study, but could you maybe just shed some insight for us into the extent to which we look to commercial development to either finance off-site stormwater projects, which it sounds like, sort of based on the funding sources we're not doing, or expectations we may put on commercial development to resolve stormwater problems on their own sites or contribute to watershed level solutions on their own sites. I hope that question makes sense. I can try to phrase it differently if not, but essentially it's sort of like the nexus between commercial redevelopment and funding of or support for stormwater management infrastructure.
Wow, that is a question that has a really, really long answer. I'll try to be succinct. For the most part, commercial development does address its impact, its stormwater impact. It does so in a way that people don't see. I mean, typically it's below ground, so you don't see it. So certainly new development does. The Lee Highway Initiative, we've been really fortunate, as we always do, to address a whole of government approach. So we've been working very, very closely with Natasha, CPHD, the primaries on the initiative, as well as ACOM. So we're looking for the possibilities for public-private partnerships there, that we can actually, again, possibly dual purpose available land to supplement our areas. As you know, it's not our only constraint, but one of our largest constraints in Arlington for, I think, everybody is just space, the lack of actual geographical, landscape. So we're looking to that. But commercial development, contemporary commercial development, obviously, since you've had, more rigorous codes adopted in the past 20 years, have really, really addressed that issue. As we've discussed at length, and it bears repeating for the public, the majority of our capacity problems today are really the result of an approach towards developing the system that could not have anticipated the growing intensity of these storms or climate change.
That, I don't think that can be repeated enough. So thank you. And this is really helpful for me, actually, as I think about future conversations with our Lee Highway residents and stakeholders. The point is, we are not relying on commercial redevelopment to proceed with some of these big projects. Quite obviously, right? We've talked about more than a few that will be financed through bond referendum and others, but that maybe there is some potential for unlocking public-private partnerships, especially around land as these projects come forward. So that was a really succinct version of what sounded like a potentially even longer answer, and I appreciate it.
We're always happy to discuss it more and in greater detail, but thank you for asking the question.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal and Ms. McBride, for that. That's helpful. Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of, I think, are pretty quick questions. So when it comes to the detention facilities at Woodstock and at Cardinal, do those underground culverts limit flexibility at all on what can be done on the surface? So are we, for example, limited to certain activities or construction types and intensities over those detention vaults, or do we pretty much have full flexibility in the future?
I would say that you have on public land where we're dual purposing public land, which is the case in both of those detention vaults. We're going to restore the full use of both the ball fields as well as the recreational fields in the park. So that flexibility is not removed by having the vault under the ground. I think that where we look for public-private partnerships, obviously we're looking for where we have ongoing maintenance agreements, et cetera. So what goes above ground on private property is of a little bit more, it becomes more complex because then you have the ongoing maintenance and repair agreement that is attached to that. So to the greatest extent possible, to the extent that we can dual or multi-purpose public lands, that is the ideal.
No, that's excellent. And really what I was trying to get at, and this is more specific to Cardinal, I would imagine, but in the future, if for whatever reason schools wanted to build an outbuilding or heaven forbid another, facility to house seats for students, would they be able to do so over this with minimal issues?
Yeah, I might attempt that one, Christian. I think for the current precast design, I think that could be a problematic to put an actual structure. That would be the only restriction, or it would be a challenge just to put it, because we can, I think Demetra was alluding to, we can put the use that's planned for that. Right. And I think generally the parks, but when it comes to an actual structure with foundation requirements, that could be a conflict and we'd have to really do some engineering. So that could be one restriction that might potentially be there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And the next question just concerns where we are with the MS4 permit. So always great to hear that we project to be on track to be able to meet the next 5-year permit requirements. Am I reading correctly that the third permit will require a 60% reduction beyond the 40% accrued of the first two?
Yes, that's correct. And if you have more specific questions and you want the program leader of that, Jason Papakosma is here. But this is, we've been sitting down and thinking ahead, and this is the purpose of the strategic compliance plan that you see referenced in FY22, because we're looking to see there are a number of actions that we're already taking that we pondered whether or not we can make the case to the state that they should be acknowledged, including these detention vaults, quite frankly, at least in part, acknowledged for positive impact on pollution reduction. So that strategic compliance plan is definitely focused primarily on the third MS4 permit to help optimize the portfolio of actions that we can take, increase cost effectiveness and performance of each of those, and also to hopefully qualify some of the actions that we may already be undertaking.
Excellent. And I think here, instead of holding you to something firm, I would just love to get a sense of your level of confidence, since you do have a 10-year window. And as you look at that 60% reduction, which seems pretty significant, what's your level of confidence that we'll be able to meet those compliance standards once they're applicable?
I'll just say philosophically, we never start from a place where we say we can't do something. I think that our challenge and what we really apply ourselves to is how do we make it the highest performing, the most resilient, the most enduring, and the most cost-effective way of approaching that. So I think we're confident we can do it. The challenge, which we're equally determined and committed to, is meeting all those other requirements.
I want to write that down with full attribution, but that was great. I love the way you explained that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. And with that, mindful that we have so much, we have utilities next, but a thank you to Mr. Moon, Tyler Smith, Mr. Papacosma, Ms. Thurber, Ms. Abel, and Ms. McBride. This has been a huge area of work over the past year since the July 8th, 2019 storm, in addition to before that. But I think it's an indication of how grateful we are for your work, that we have questions, but we're certainly, I'll speak for myself, pleased that you worked so hard under the surface, not always in the limelight over the last year, but grateful for all your work, and we will thank you each and then move on to utilities. And I think it's actually back to you, Ms. Abel, for the start of the presentation, or Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The continued focus and the continued and overall focus of the utility CIP is our planned and systematic reinvestment in our infrastructure, as well as the overall system resilience and redundancy. Our CIP is guided by various master plans, which lay out our priorities for replenishment and reinvestment of the nearly 1,000 miles of water mains and sanitary sewer collection, as well as the water pollution control plant. In alignment with industry best practices, we're replenishing the system at a faster pace than it is depreciating. Much of what you see in our CIP is not new. We've been systematically funding the replenishment of the system in a steady and programmatic way. The utility CIP also covers our required contributions to both the Washington Aqueduct, which supplies our drinking water, as well as the DC Water Blue Plains Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant, which treats a small portion of the Arlington wastewater. Slide. Since we last talked about our CIP last summer, a few major projects have been completed, which are highlighted on this slide. Highlights include our Glebe Road 36-inch water main. The stretch from North Old Glebe Road to Little Falls Road was rehabilitated with a high-density polyethylene lining to put it back into service. You can see in the top right picture that there's the HDPE lining that's then pulled through the existing water main. We also rehabilitated the Lee water tanks. And of particular note, our supervisory control and data acquisition, our SCADA system at the Water Distribution Control Center, went through major hardware and communication updates. And that was completed in January. This enhanced and upgraded our water security, providing redundant backups, which is supported by the county's technologies department. At the Water Pollution Control Plant, we completed the first projects in the Solids Master Plan. This was the motor control cabinet at the preliminary treatment building. Also at that building, there was a heating project completed, and we also had a roof replacement at our secondary blower building. Key projects underway include the design of the Fort Myer water main and the Spout Run sanitary sewer rehabilitation project. Currently under construction are additional projects, which Mike Collins will highlight later in the presentation. For the utility CIP, we're divided into 4 main programs: water sewer maintenance capital, water distribution, sanitary improvements, and finally the water pollution control plant. You'll see that the plant is about half of the total CIP, and that's due primarily to the Solids Master Plan projects, which make up about 60% of the plant's overall CIP. We also dedicate considerable resources to our maintenance capital program, which rehabs and replaces the water sewer systems. On the funding side, it's important to remember that the utilities is an enterprise fund, which is self-sufficient, and it funds itself through our user fees and revenues. The PAYGO funding is the transfer from the operating fund, meaning it's funded through the water and the sewer rate. Developer contributions, as Ms. Crystal mentioned earlier, they come through from our infrastructure availability fees, and those make up about 12% of our funding. Existing fund balance on our annual PAYGO comprise about 42% of our funding, with new bonds and existing bonds that have already been issued funding another 37%. With the large capital plant program, that leads to considerable contributions from our interjurisdictional partners, as they contribute 17% toward those projects. Now I'll turn it over to Mike Collins to talk more about the specific program and projects for the CIP.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon. So here we show a listing of our maintenance capital program, and I'm not going to go through these individually, but they do include our annual recurring rehabilitation and replacement programs. New this year, there is a program for pump station maintenance capital, so that we're specifically programming funds for those critical but aging assets. And also the trade center equipment and improvements program has been increased because in FY23, we are looking to fund the replacement of the rock crusher and dirt shaker down here at the Earth Products Yard. These are critical pieces of equipment for water, sewer, streets, so that we're able to break down and reuse materials, spoil materials from repair work, and do not have to take those materials to the landfill. Let's go to the next slide, please. So as Chris said, we'll look at some of our key programs and projects. We're going to start on the water side with our rehab and replacement program. The water main relining program is specifically targeted to neighborhoods that have older unlined pipes. And this program rejuvenates the system while improving water quality and flow capacities. The second component or aspect of this is our water main replacement program, which allows for opportunistic replacements of our water mains. And these are done particularly in conjunction with other utility or street projects. And currently we're targeting 2.5% of our mains annually in this program. So our investment in the system exceeds the depreciation rate. And on the next slide, we just illustrate, you can see here, over the last 20 plus years or so, we've replaced about 16% of our water mains and relined another 11%. Again, it's our recommendation that we continue at the 2.5% rate of investment for rehabilitation and replacement. So next we'll look at the sewer side, our sanitary sewer side, and on this side of the utility house, the backbone of our investment program is really in our sewer collection system is the I&I program, which utilizes cured in place pipe to rehabilitate older sanitary sewers. This technology achieves complete structural restoration while also addressing stormwater infiltration into the system. As we have surpassed the 50% replacement threshold, and we've effectively renewed great segments of our system, the funding from this program will start over the coming years to be diverted to other initiatives. Essentially, we're reaching a point of diminishing returns with this technology in our smaller pipes, and we'll start to focus our investment on our larger pipes. And on the next slide, again, we'll show we have a map which illustrates our progress, the extent of renewal in the system through cured in place pipe. Next, we'll see a list of the key projects in our water distribution expansion program. The common thread amongst these projects is resiliency and redundancy. So to look at a few of them specifically, the gravity transmission main, we just recently awarded a contract for construction of the gravity transmission B1 project. And on the map here, the section shown in blue is actually, which is what was just awarded, is actually the second phase of this project, because we had collaborated with Arlington Public Schools to accelerate construction of the section shown in green. That was accelerated to coincide with the Dorothy Ham construction. I believe that was in 2017. Overall, this is part of a larger gravity transmission program, which will ultimately extend south of I-66 and into the Ballston area. This project will provide flexibility in our distribution system and redundant feed for the RB corridor, as well as our highest elevations in the Lee pressure zone along Virginia Route 29. Next project we're going to highlight is, and this is a project that is nearing construction, is a collaboration with Fairfax Water, which will provide a 16-inch connection from their system into our reservoir system. This connection will be useful in emergencies to supplement flows to the western portion of the county, which is at some of our highest elevations. This is just one of several interconnects that we are exploring, and which will provide in total will provide the ability to access water at multiple different points in our distribution system, and potentially even from different treatment facilities. All of these initiatives are looking towards providing us with greater reliability and resiliency. So next, on our sanitary sewer improvement category, this includes regular funding for improvements that may be opportunities to leverage other construction activities or to address unforeseen immediate needs. But then we also have funding for a really complicated rehabilitation of a critical trunk sewer, which we'll talk about right now in the next slide. So the Spout Run sewer is a 33-inch interceptor sewer, which collects wastewater at the head of Spout Run Parkway, and it carries it into Roslyn, where it then travels through our Potomac interceptor system down to the plant. Along the way, the Spout Run sewer traverses National Park Service land, I-66, dozens of private properties, and it's at a typical depth of over 100 feet. We have recently cleaned and inspected the line, and luckily the line is an excellent candidate for a trenchless technology such as relining. However, the ancillary work of taking this key piece of infrastructure out of service while gaining access to it at critical points and maintaining flow for the properties upstream and along the route which rely on it make this actually a very complex project, which is just beginning to go into design, and we intend to be in construction in a couple years. Moving on to the plant, to the water pollution control plant. The funding here is dominated by the Arlington Regen program, or formerly known as the Solids Master Plan. It's now being known as the Arlington Regen program. But we have other work ongoing, again, with a focus on resiliency and reliability. For example, in the maintenance capital funding, we have allocated for the procurement of a 4th centrifuge to supplement the existing 3 that we have. And we continue to upgrade our technology for efficiency, but particularly we've been upgrading over the last couple of years to ensure that our systems remain up to date and secure with modern technology and protocols. So looking at some of the projects that are underway on the water pollution control side, we have dedicated funding to improve the 31st Street lot, which is adjacent to the plant. These improvements will provide very critical operational space for the plant as we embark upon the Arlington Regen program. The improvements will also build out parking for ART bus drivers that work out of the ART light maintenance facility over on Eads. And precedent to the construction, we have worked with the adjacent neighbors to clear invasive vegetation along the back of the parcel, and we continue to treat against resurgence. Then, as I mentioned before, the lion's share of funding at the plant is dedicated to the Arlington Regen program or Solid Master Plan. Major construction on phase 1 of this program will begin this year with upgrades to facilities and equipment at the plant's headworks. Construction on this program is expected to continue for 6 years as we implement critical improvements to our solids handling processes. The new processes will be safer, more efficient, and they'll generate a higher quality and more marketable solids product. They will also recover biogas from our waste and beneficially reuse that resource in the community. Then lastly, we want to highlight that we continue to renew our technology and utilities with particular focus on our backbone infrastructure, such as communications and information devices and protocols. The recent cybersecurity incidents on governments and infrastructure around the country have certainly illustrated for all of us the importance of investing in these systems, and we have been doing this for many years and will continue to do so. So last thing I want to leave for you is some of the things that we anticipate to be important issues in the coming years and that you may see reflected in future CIPs. Resiliency and redundancy will continue to be a critical area for our utility. We remain committed to continued investments and upgrades at the Washington Aqueduct and continue to be interested in upgrading the treatment processes there, though we are currently having to work with our aqueduct partners to solve some funding challenges. The Army has also commissioned a source water redundancy and resiliency study, which would have significant regional benefits, though the study and the costs are very conceptual at this time. Finally, you can see, as we've mentioned, that we're pursuing additional interconnects with Fairfax Water again, with the continued goal of ensuring resiliency and even source water redundancy. We've discussed resiliency and risk mitigation throughout this presentation. We're excited about the ramp, which was discussed during the Stormwater CIP. That study will provide valuable recommendations for our major infrastructure at the plant and help ensuring that we're preparing for all manners of risks, to include climate and meteorological risks. And we do list here the federal infrastructure bill, which is being considered on Capitol Hill. This may be an exciting opportunity to achieve some important regional priorities, things such as the source water production, protection and resiliency, advanced treatment at the Washington Aqueduct, or rehabilitation of the federally owned water main system, which feeds the Pentagon, the airport, and serves as important redundancy for Arlington County. And lastly, we list PFAS, which is a class of chemicals used in a wide variety of industries, from clothing to cookware to cosmetics to firefighting. The EPA has expressed a particular interest in PFAS, which are prevalent throughout the environment and can be found in source water. Currently, the EPA is studying the health impacts of PFAS exposures in humans, and the water industry as a whole, we anticipate regulatory requirements may be promulgated. And that is all I have for you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. That's plenty. That you say that's all you have, that's plenty. So we will certainly take questions. I guess on the infrastructure bill, for colleagues and the manager's benefit, Senator Kane was on the Northern Virginia Regional Commission call yesterday and indicated a lot of uncertainty as to how much and when the infrastructure bill might move forward, but a lot of confidence that eventually there will be an infrastructure bill, which I know would impact this area of work in particular. I just want to, earlier today on the redundancy piece, there was a letter that Mr. Emanuel had sent regarding water supply that I know is ongoing. Appreciate your work in that area, Mr. Emanuel, but other than that, colleagues, do we have questions? I do not have burning questions in this area, and given that's not an indication that we aren't grateful for all the work that you, Mr. Collins, and so many are doing, but we, at least from my perspective at this stage, appreciate all your work in this area. So I am not seeing hands, and in that case, we will reiterate our thanks. And if I'm missing anyone, please feel free to interrupt me. But in that case, we'll thank you, Mr. Collins, you, Ms. Abell, and Mr. Emanuel, Mr. Moon, Tyler Smith, Ms. Strawn. We're not in person, so we don't get the chance to try to sort of visually with body language indicate how much we appreciate all you're doing, Mr. Hundelt. And I think that covers at least the high level. I know with you are so many colleagues and Arlington County staff who are helping make this area of work well. So I don't know, Mr. Collins or Mr. Schwartz, if you had any other questions or points on this area or colleagues did. We're ready to go forward to public safety, I believe, is next. Is that right, Mr. Schwartz?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chair. Up next is Amy Costanzo, who works as the head of budget for our police department. She's part of the public safety information technology team that's been in place, I think, now for about 6 years. And so she will be making a presentation where she will walk through all the public safety public safety capital needs. And the public safety capital team will speak, and there'll be other representatives as needed from fire and from emergency management. So over to you, Amy.
Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. So yes, as Mr. Manager said, I'm going to be giving the presentation, but I'm also joined by my colleagues in the other department who can help answer specific questions and jump in as necessary. So our first slide is about some key considerations in developing our CIP. So first of all, as we know, the capital dollars fund our most critical systems in public safety. Our public safety systems are rather large, and sometimes they take years to develop and upgrade. So we need commitment to our refresh cycles to keep everything up to date and in a state of good repair. And sometimes we do regional collaboration on the core systems, which means that the timelines for these systems can be extended depending on how the progress is being made. And they often require larger scopes of work because we're working with multiple jurisdictions. But overall, these projects lead to greater efficiency. So here's our public safety program overview. So public safety information technology was established several years ago to do the following. It provided opportunities to share software and applications because a lot of the public safety agencies use similar technology. So this reduced redundancy. It creates a single IT budget for public safety with 10-year projections and plans for staged refreshes, which typically take place every 5 to 7 years. It also accomplishes an increased transparency and availability of data. It increases awareness of IT initiatives, promoting reuse and reengineering of existing technology, and it streamlines resources because all of the people who work in this area work under one umbrella now instead of being super spread out. So here are some key accomplishments and some recent projects we've done. So as you all know, we launched our body-worn camera program last year in December, really got off the ground in January. We've also completed the computer forensic server refreshed. Our e-summons project is also active right now. We implemented the fire records management system, the internet protocol address simulcast with OEM, LiveScan, our public safety server refresh, including our in-car camera servers, and WestNet, which is our fire station alerting system. So here are some projects that are underway. We have computer-aided dispatch, a replacement of that. We are upgrading the fire command vehicle with new technology and making it usable by both fire and police. We're going to share that vehicle. And we also have the inmate telephone, tablet, and video visitation project in progress right now within the detention center. So this is just a brief overview of the projects we are asking to be funded 22 through 24. So a little over 8 million for next fiscal year. It increases by about 2.5 million the following fiscal year, and then it goes down to about 7 million in FY24. And in these next slides, we're going to walk through the projects that constitute all of that. So our first project is for fire defibrillators. These are carried on all the fire department response vehicles. It's medical technology used to save lives, monitoring blood gases in transit, heartbeats, and it really reduces the time that the victim will need to wait upon arrival to the hospital. So this is a replacement of all of these. We are asking for $3.5 million, and this would take place in 2024. Next, we have fire portable radios. These are just the handheld radios that the fire department uses to allow two-way communication between them and the ECC. We are asking for $3.6 million in FY23. Next, we have our fire vehicle apparatus refreshment. This is an annual ask. Next year, we are asking for $8.3 million to replace some of the apparatus. Some of the apparatus, this came up in a previous session. Yes, some of the apparatus are part of a buyback program that allows the county to acquire new equipment, less the trade-in value for the existing equipment. So we save a little bit of money there on some of our vehicles. Next, we have the mobile data computers. These are the laptops that are in the police vehicles that the police use when they are going to calls and receiving information from the ECC. We are asking for $3.5 million to refresh the MDCs next year in FY22. Next, we have our e-summon system. This is the system that allows that allows it's part of the cost for each criminal or traffic case in the district or circuit courts. It basically just allows you to get in electronic summons when you have to go to court. This isn't really asking for $133,000. This is more of a revenue projection as to what we expect to make next year, so to speak, because we assessed a $5 fee on the part of the cost of each criminal or traffic case. So this is how much money is expected to be brought into the program, but this program is a self-funding project. The money that is received through this program is used to fund the program. So we're not actually asking for a ton of money. This is more what we're expecting to have next year to keep the program going. Next, we have public safety radios. This would be completed in FY26. We're asking for $2.8 million. So before the public safety radios were for the fire department, these are the public safety radios for police and sheriff. Next, we have the radio base station and system replacement. We are asking for $1.75 million in FY23. This system is used to transmit public safety and other critical public safety information via portable and mobile radios. Next, we have the magnometer and x-ray machine in the courthouse. We're asking for $300,000 in FY22. This is to make sure people are not carrying in any threatening items or weapons when they enter the court building. And then last, we have our Justice Center security system. We're asking for $1 million in FY23 and then $200,000 after that. This is a series of cameras, touchscreens, and other equipment that control the access points, the alarms, the intercoms throughout the detention facility. And I believe that is it.
Thank you, Ms. Costanzo. Appreciate the presentation. I don't see questions. I will just say that over the last week with the fire yesterday and some police work Friday morning, we've been reminded of how quickly public safety can change, and certainly that is on our mind as we consider the capital improvements necessary to make sure that our public safety personnel can do the work of keeping all of us safe. I did see one hand, and I'm just pulling up. Looks like it's
mine,
Ms.
Mr.
Bristol.
Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I have a very basic question about the mobile data computers on slide 10. Could you tell me a little bit, we're going to hear next, actually, I think, about the enterprise-wide system with a lot of investment in laptops throughout the system. Could you explain to me why these public safety computers, or how they differ from laptops or mobile hotspots used throughout the rest of the enterprise system? Is it security? Is it reliability? Why invest separately? What do these do different than other mobile computing devices that will be used throughout the enterprise?
I believe there are security features, but to answer this question, I'm going to kick it over to Mary Paxton, who's the lead of PSIT. I think she can better answer this question.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, these are very different than our standard laptop. First of all, they're ruggedized, so they can take a great deal of wear and usage by the public safety staff. They're also highly secure because they have vSync connection from them, so they have to be secure. They're running all the public safety systems as well, so there's a reason for them to be much more secure than your standard laptop.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for that background and for the presentation, and additional thanks go to Acting Chief Penn, Deputy Chief Quigley, Chief Pavlitz of the Fire Department, and Casey Bailey, Joseph Reshtar, the Fire Division Chief, and Jeffrey Bergen. Appreciate all the work you are doing. And with that, we will move on to our
Did
next.
have a question, Mr. Chair, if I may?
Oh, I didn't see you. Go ahead, Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you. So can you just explain a little bit, and Ms. Costanzo, I don't know if this is for you or maybe someone with a medical background, but what's the difference between the mobile defibrillators that are contained in this ask and the AED devices that we have through our public facilities in the county?
Does someone from fire want to speak to that?
Good afternoon. I can answer that question. So the AEDs that are found inside of the buildings are automatic defibrillators. They really only have the ability to read a person's heartbeat rhythm to determine whether or not a shock needs to happen. The fire defibrillators that we have on the fire apparatus are so much more complex and so much more advanced. So not only can they read the heart rhythm, they will actually show you the EKG readout so that you can look at it, determine what the correct response is. It actually sends that information directly to the hospital so that the hospital is aware of what's going on with the patient, so that once the patient actually gets there, they don't have to wait, they don't have to run another EKG on the patient. It also monitors critical blood gases, so it can tell whether or not a person has, carbon monoxide poisoning and things of that nature.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. It's very helpful. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. With that, we will reiterate thanks to all who are involved in the technology to make sure our public safety can serve us all well, and we will move on to the next presentation. I think Mr. Belcher has appeared. Mr. Schwartz, would you like to give one of your classic Schwartz style introductions, or do we go directly to Mr. Belcher?
As we say in Massachusetts, I'm going to introduce Mr. Jack Belcher, and he probably is going to turn it over to Mr. Rick Sternitsky, but over to you, Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I'm turning this over to actually John Bayless, our CTO, Rick Sternitsky, and Gilbert Pisano, our budget officer. Take it away, John.
Yeah, good afternoon. So we have Gilbert bring up the slide deck, and Ms. Crystal already touched on the main topic that you're going to hear throughout our presentation, and that is the key consideration of mobility for our workforce. So let's go to the next slide, Gilbert. So mobility, we also have a post-COVID posture for return to office for our workforce and our in-building technology. You'll hear some about that. We have an increased emphasis, obviously, on connectivity, both within our buildings and outside of our buildings, and security is a big part of that as well. In our initiative to replace Prism, this is a new version, and we delayed that decision last year because of the pandemic. And then on the next slide, we're going to review the replacement of several systems. So the first of which is our telephone system. It's I think we put this in 2008. We're going to do a roadmap study in 22, and then hopefully a replacement in 23, 24. ACE, which is our collection system, that's our next refreshment cycle for that is in 24, 25. Real estate assessment system is due for replacement in 23 and 24. Our ERMS, which is OnBase that many of you use. We're going to do a roadmap study in 22 and a modernization of that product in 23 through 25. We talked a little bit about Prism, and then we're going to do a land record system replacement in FY23. And again, the replacement or modernization of these platforms or products is centered around the ability to be mobile, and then to take advantage of the cloud where possible. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick Sternitsky to go over each individual program and the funding for those.
Good afternoon. Thanks, John. In a little bit more detail, we've got two blocks of projects and programs here. The upper block falls under the enterprise work of DTS. And that ranges from everything from equipment to AV to large software systems and user devices. And then the other items that we'll talk about at the end belong to specific departments, but are operated and funded through DTS. Next slide, please. Audio visual equipment for conference rooms. This is a follow-on project to the conference room upgrade that took place in Bosman. It is going to take the same technology and roll it out across the county into as many as 30 large and medium conference rooms across the county in other facilities and buildings, predominantly those that are county buildings, although we're looking at a few that are not. The idea here is to promote the ability to have mixed mode meetings like the one we're having here today, but also be able to host some number of people inside the facility and be able to have the same set of facilities available for public and semi-public meetings such as commissions. Courtroom upgrades for body-worn cameras. This is a follow-on to the courtrooms that already support digital evidence from body-worn cameras. This is funding from the body-worn camera project to provide additional AV resources into 2 courtrooms in FY22. Next slide, please. Connect Arlington program. This is a Go Bond program in its 2nd year. This is refurbishment, refreshment, and small enhancement to Arlington County's fiber network, which currently covers 70 route miles and touches or connects 90 different structures between county and schools. The projects here are 3 years worth of small backlog in terms of taking cable that might be aerial and burying that cable because the poles are subject to being damaged by auto accidents, changes and modifications that need to happen because of certain utility changes, which might not have been anticipated in the utility fundings. Some of the system now is 8 years old. We do keep a stock of cable for emergency repair, and that needs refreshment from time to time. So that program is actually in year 2. We're a bit behind due to the pandemic, but we're trying to catch up this summer. Enterprise Record Management System Modernization, ERMS, otherwise known as OnBase. OnBase is our singular document repository. It's utilized today by 60 other applications in the county to maintain the stock of documents in perpetuity in many cases, which is everything from plans and records to meeting minutes. We're going to do a roadmap study in FY22 with the idea that at a minimum, we're going to move this application and the storage of these documents to the cloud because it can be stored better in the cloud than we can, and there's some long-term cost advantages there. We expect the project to run from FY23 to FY25. While we haven't exactly selected the final system yet, it may be OnBase, it may be other. The study will define what our pathway will need to be there. Next slide. HR and financial system. This is PRISM, otherwise known as Oracle EBS. The county had made the decision to go and stay with Oracle EBS some 18 months ago. The project to roll this product out at $14 million. It is a new system. It is not exactly the same system that we use today. So it has more modules, it has more HR facilities, more data reporting capabilities than we have today, and would come a long way for both HR and finance. That project is now back on the books with a start in 23 and a finish in 24. Network equipment, worker mobility, power systems. This is a program for regular refreshment of network equipment, security equipment. And right now we have a backlog of work to do in building. So this is the refreshment of what's called the network edge. This is the plug-in connections and the wireless connections used by employees and visitors to our buildings. We held back on this work in the last fiscal year due to the pandemic when the buildings were not highly occupied. As we have a return to office, we're looking at it, this is department by department and building by building to make sure that we get the right technology in there. Right now, we're beginning courts police, and that will continue throughout the fiscal year. Much of this is funded with previous year funds that are just carrying forward. Next, please. PC replacement program. This is the rolling replacement of desktops and laptops. Our focus, as in the last 2 years, is laptops over desktops wherever possible to give the worker mobility and be able to work from anywhere. We have been very successful with that over the last year, also supplying equipment for all the various COVID and emergency teams. And we're going to continue in that effort. FY22 happens to be a rather large year in the cycle for replacement of equipment. So we have a high goal to reach, but I think we'll get there. Server hardware and data storage program. We're in the third phase of an end-of-life refreshment for the county servers, hosts, and storage equipment. As we come to the end of this 3-year cycle at $2.4 million, there'll be a change of focus where we're going to focus more on putting more money in the cloud and less in physical hardware. So this is the end of the last large-scale hardware refresh that we're going to see. Next, please. Telephone system study and refreshment. This has been moved forward. The county's phone system was installed in 2008. And while the VoIP phone system we have is up to date and maintained in mechanically good condition and digitally good condition, we're probably not optimal anymore in the way that we do call centers, the number of station sets or telephones that we have versus the way people actually operate. Today, we're on a Teams call. There are some people who would be perfectly fine with a soft phone and a PC and not need a desk phone. There are some people who will be better served with simply a cellular phone. So making all these technologies work together in a seamless way, we're going to do a study in FY22 and find out how we can mix these systems in such a way to produce lowest cost and highest utilization for all the employees and still get better call center utilization than we have today. Part of this is to build a foundation, a technology foundation that reaches out into future CRM and the current public web project so that you can have what's called an omni-channel environment. So we should not care so much whether someone comes in by phone call or by text or by email. We should be able to have conversations with them in any of those modes or all of those modes at the same time. And this is a look to do that starting from the voice perspective. Next, please. Revenue collection. This is ACE, otherwise known as Gentax. This is a revenue and treasurer programs to take money in for everything from assessments and levies and our payment portal system. This is due for regular refreshment, again, beginning FY24, finishing in 25. And again, I think there's a follow-on in 25, 26. This is just the normal refreshment cycle for this product. In order to be where we need to be in the payments world, this product has a 3 to 4 year life cycle. Next, please. The land record system. So the circuit court records liens, judgments, titles to real property, and that is an aged out system that needs to be replaced and may have linkage issues in the future with our document management system. So we're looking to replace that system in FY23 at the cost of $1 million. The real estate assessment system was a homegrown environment, which is somewhere between 20 and 25 years old in all of its parts. It no longer represents the panoply of real estate types that need to be assessed and the mechanisms by which we would provide the programmatic assessment of all the properties. There are 66,000 parcels in Arlington that need annual assessment and bill generation. So this system is looking to be replaced at a cost of $3 million across FY23 and 24. And that concludes our presentation. We can take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stranitzky. I don't have quite the Massachusetts accent, but very much appreciate the presentation. A lot of work there. I think in this case it was Ms. Crystal and then Mr. Dorsey, if I have it correct. Go ahead, Ms. Crystal.
Thank you so much. So one question about the desktop replacement program, which I think are goals we could have all supported before the pandemic and certainly can support now, or the PC replacement program. The price tag on that seems big, which is why I'm asking. And so is that because we're essentially replacing, you mentioned that the useful life is 3 to 4 years. Is that because we anticipate replacing more or less every laptop in the enterprise across the CIP? And maybe to put that question a different way, could you talk to me a little bit about how you benchmark that against other, I mean, PCs are easy because everyone has to buy them, right? Other local governments, even the private sector, you know, how do we benchmark it to know that what we're paying is roughly in the ballpark of what our peers might?
Okay, so office equipment in general has a gap lifetime of 3 to 5 years. 5 on the outset, 3 on the short side. Laptops have a tendency to last 1 year less than desktops, simply because people are hopefully taking them with them every day. So there is some wear and tear damage there. So you back that number down by a year. The desktops run 4 years because that's what we can get maintenance and warranty from the manufacturers. After the manufacturer's end of support or end of life the products, it becomes difficult for us to support them. And if we have a catastrophic failure of any particular user device, the manufacturers after the 4-year period won't help us. And in the laptop world, that's generally 3 years to 3.5 years, and then they'll cut the support off. So there's a bit of, call it programmatic
obsolescence.
Obsolescence, exactly. So, and all of the jurisdictions here locally are on the same basic schedule because we all use the same basic vendors.
Okay. I suppose that is what it is. I think, you know, it seems like perhaps an industry then ripe for disruption. And so maybe we can keep our eyes on opportunities like that in the years to come.
We do stretch them. We have equipment out there now that's a little over 4 years, and we're comfortable with that because we've done some in-house sparing. So we have the equipment to replace some desktops with some midlife desktops that have come back. So we are recycling equipment. As we put a lot of laptops out in the last 12 months, we've had a fair number of desktops come back that are becoming rehabilitated, and they'll go right back out. They'll probably actually become public-facing PCs to be used in other places in the county until they need replacement as well. But your note about the total size being 7.072 million. Yeah. There's a large bump. It's almost like a sine wave. So there's a bump that we have to deal with in 2022, and it predates me. So I don't know why we have this bump, but it's 3.2 million in 2022, 2 million in 23, and then 1.8 in 24, and then the sine wave will start to repeat itself. So it has something to do with how we originally armed people with technology some large number of cycles ago. And we're trying to flatten that out. The more laptops we get out there, the more that curve will flatten. You know, my hope is 2 years out, I'll be able to project this with a flat line and a you know, and maybe an interest or some kind of bump year to year, but certainly flatten it out.
Okay, that's helpful. I think it also could be helpful. I imagine you're tracking this, so if we might be able to get some visibility into it, you know, what we're projecting on spends and distribution of new devices, especially the laptops versus what we actually are. It seems to me that I wouldn't be surprised, as you were saying, right? There's some that wear and tear is less extreme than we anticipated. There's some that can be recycled. And so if it turns out that we're coming in below that planned spend year over year, it could be helpful to adjust accordingly.
Please. We have an asset management system that went in, actually came online, I guess, about 6-7 months ago, that gives us a great deal of visibility into the life cycle of each piece of equipment, and actually, and sometimes unfortunately, into the life cycle of how users use equipment. And it's funny, some people go through a lot of equipment and other people never seem to have a problem. So yeah. We actually will begin reporting on this on a regular basis, probably, I would say, end of summer. We'll give some visibility as to what that looks like.
I think that would be great. Certainly, we've been in extraordinary times with the pandemic. I'm picturing all of our employees who are perhaps trying to protect their county laptop from jelly spills and everything else as they share virtual workspace with their K-12 kids or others. But yeah, I think that'd be really helpful. My other question was about the upgrades to county facilities, audiovisual equipment for conference rooms. This may be a question to put to Mr. Belcher, but if you've got insight, I'd love to hear it too. I assume that that investment is largely planned for the purposes of county staff being able to do their work on kind of a hybrid basis. But one of the things we're starting to think about a lot is virtual participation, or increasingly, what would hybrid participation look like? And I know, for example, the county board, the Transportation Commission, and the Planning Commission stream our meetings from the boardroom. The boardroom is equipped for that. It's a little harder for our other commissions to do that because not every conference room has that capacity. So I think my query is the audiovisual equipment that is planned to be invested in for the conference rooms, is that sufficient to allow streaming of meetings to the general public, or is that really just about equipping them for somebody joining via Teams for that conference, if that question makes sense?
It should be all of the above.
Okay.
Now, if we need high-grade AV and high-level recording, we'd have to have David Wood go to one of these particular rooms to set that up. It's not, automatic throughout the whole county to do high-level AV recording. But the mixed mode or hybrid meeting is what we're gearing towards here. There was a meeting actually just this morning with DES, because as the Bosman renovation continues, now we're renovating the public spaces in Bosman, which is going to take some rooms offline. So at a minimum, we need to have some fairly large rooms that can step in and take the commission loads from those rooms and move them to other facilities in the county until floors 1 through 3 come back fully online.
What's also happening, Katie, is the industry is recognizing the change that's taking place. They call it a hybrid paradox, and what that is that the whole idea of how we're operating is changing and morphing, and so we're going to have a situation where they're going to have as many people off-site as on-site, and they got to be able to communicate in different ways. And you got to integrate people and places and various processes together. And there's some amazing things that are being developed by Microsoft, and they're going to be coming over shortly. And we based a lot of our procurements on this. And so it's going to create an environment where you can turn on just about any facility, have it stream not only for internal collaboration, but have it externally. And not only have it in, say, a county facility, but actually look at other facilities that may be in an area we want to get to. And so we're very excited about that. And that's part of the work that Rick's doing with the Department of Environmental Services to define that.
Great. Thank you thank you both very much. I think we might still have some behavioral challenges of trying to do hybrid public engagement. It can be a little hard to meaningfully participate in a meeting when everyone else is in person and you're virtual, but knowing that the technological challenges are perhaps fewer than I might have surmised is heartening, and I'm glad that we're planning to invest in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. Mr. Schwartz, did you have thoughts on this one?
Yeah, real quick, I wanted to echo what was said, and I would point out to Ms. Crystal that I think the technology challenges are really, we can meet those, I think, fairly, I don't want to say easily, but we'll meet them. The real challenge is going to be, and I know there are so many people who participate in our commissions and in our meetings, I think we're going to need to enlist them to be able to figure out how to do this, because I'm making a commitment that staff also are not necessarily going to be needed physically in every specific meeting space. So our commission chairs and commission members will probably be enlisted in some sort of technology corps with Jack Belcher leading a class, probably start off with calisthenics of some kind.
I need it. I need the calisthenics right now.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I suppose that, the few rooms I've been in, I've seen the Chamber of Commerce recently tried to do a hybrid meeting, and the few rooms I've been in, there's some behavior, we got to get the participants to make sure that they're close enough to a mic to speak into it. I guess that would be part of it. But I'm glad to see that this investment is in there and eager for that work that's ahead. I think it was Mr. Dorsey next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll pick off with, start off with a thread that Ms. Crystal introduced. So when it comes to the devices, the laptops, Do we return those to the vendor for some trade-in value, or are those just recycled?
At the end of the 3 to 4 year cycle, we actually dispose of them. So we remove the disk drives wherever possible, and we put them through a grinder for security purposes, and the rest goes to a company which destroys them.
So would it not be possible, feasible, or would it be too cost ineffective to recondition them, taking all security protocols and making them available for people of limited means, but who nonetheless should have access to mobile devices?
We certainly can discuss that. That's not been my experience in the past before I came to the county, that taking a 4-year-old machine and actually refurbishing it had value. But we certainly could look at that again. There are also charitable organizations if we wish to donate them. I'd have to defer here to DMF because they actually have a destruction policy for this equipment that I have to follow.
Got
if
it.
we want to modify that in some way so that we could either make charitable contributions or sell the equipment at salvage, I would have to speak with them.
Understood, and it's probably very complex, but I was inspired by your conversation with Ms. Crystal, whereas, you have this ability by, utilizing newer parts mid-life cycle to essentially recondition a machine. And a 4-year-old machine, while may not necessarily have active support from a vendor, is going to be perfectly useful for a lot of different applications, particularly with gentle use. And so if it was possible, it was something that interested me. But the larger point of my question is really around, I love one of the earlier slides, which prioritized your focus on connectivity and security. And at least to my layman's ear, those actually seem to be in tension. There's an inverse relationship between connectivity, if we associate, user friendliness with connectivity as well, with security. So can you just talk a little bit more about how you go about achieving those goals, which could somewhat be in tension?
So from the employee perspective, you would like employees to be able to work anywhere at any time. So if they were so armed and had mobile equipment and they could do that, that makes them fundamentally a better employee in many ways, not just their choice of where to work. And as much as that works for some people, doesn't work for all, but actually gives us the ability to have more coverage, more time during the day. So obviously there's lots of benefits there. When you do that, you open yourself up for some security risk. So there needs to be a kind of dual approach here, that if you're going to make an investment in mobility, you have to make an investment in mobility security. And threats come from the outside. So one really does go with the other, and they need to keep pace with each other, which is the sustainment of the two programs at the same time becomes very important. So every year we have security asks, operational security asks, and some years we have capital asks. I don't think we have a large capital ask this year, but that also runs in a cycle. So we have to maintain both those programs in tandem.
What we're going to do, Mr. Dorsey, as well, one of the biggest problems we have when people go off-site is they have problems getting access. To forget their password, they have problems getting authenticated to get into the system. Later this month, we're going to be introducing some new ways to make it easier. For a simple thing we can talk about. Right now, every 3 months, you have to change your password. And if you're like me, you forget what you did, and it's a pain, complete pain to do it.
Yes, it is.
I'll tell you it is. So we're going to move to a 12-character password. Before you shoot me, let me tell you what it means. What this means is you'll be able to keep that password for a year without having to change it. That does two things. One, it makes it easier for you to get access. We're more assured then that we've secured your device coming in from other places. And what it does is reduces the support burden on my staff, because they're continually getting calls from me every 3 months saying, what was my password again, and how do I change this? And so I can free them up to do other things, such as to support the return to work, to office, in terms of what we're trying to do in the next few months.
We're also moving towards an environment that's called zero trust, one step at a time. Zero trust means that I trust you, Mr. Dorsey, from where you are right now in the same way that I would if you were standing in the office. So what it does is it removes the geolocation of where you are on our network or not on our network. So I trust you and the device and the things that allow you to certify yourself on that device. And now I still worry, but I care a little bit less about where you are because I know that you are you. So that form of identity and security management is what we're striving for. And it's a very long walk, and we're in the early steps.
Okay. And so thank you for that. And the second part of that question, so we can do all that we can on the capital side and on the planning side and everything else, but as you both have directly said, so much of this is incumbent on effective user behavior, which can be challenging, particularly with an organization as big as ours. So, notwithstanding I love the monthly videos that Mr. Archambault sends us and asks us to do, but is there anything more that we can think about on the operational side to sort of minimize these risks? Because I'm just constantly bombarded with stories about how so many breaches, so many cyber breaches, happen not because of insufficient infrastructure, but because of user vulnerability.
That's an ongoing task, a challenge we have, and it's that ability we have with our vendor to be able to monitor us in internet time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, has done immense. But you speak to something which, I know I've raised that cog a lot. We're unequal. We do a fairly good job in security, but there are many my colleagues in other jurisdictions who don't have the resources that I have. I think that there's a concept the federal government has used for years, and I think it's something we need to come back to and think about on regional government. That's the concept of shared services. What they do in the federal government, rather than have multiple payroll systems, they have one payroll system that supports multiple agencies. In cybersecurity, there really needs to be a different mechanism we have today in terms of how we combat that. Because the reality is, it's not going to be just Arlington that's hit. It's going to be somebody else, some other place that infects us. A few weeks ago, we had a major attack by a jurisdiction up in New York State, where basically was compromised and there was forcing information at us. We had to defend. We really need to think about how we can, through shared services, maximize the resources we're applying to cybersecurity, not just for Arlington, but regionally, say, for Northern Virginia. My colleague in Falls Church has one person and a part-time person working with them. It's in no situation to support something like that. I say that, and my colleague in Fairfax, the CIO there, has a team of 15 people who's focusing on it, and I don't have anything like that. But if we could pool our resources to affect things like this, I think we'd be more secure than we are today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey, Mr. Belcher, and Mr. Stranitzky. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually wanted to ask, practically saying that, like Mr. Dorsey, there is only one part of that. So preventing is one thing, defending is extension of this one thing. Being ready for the case, sometimes I hear experts in cybersecurity, cynically saying it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And then, so what is the CIP treatment of our readiness to react and to be resilient in case that we fall victims of an attack, like, for example, the DC, what we've seen in DC very recently and other places with, ransomware attacks and new ransomware attacks.
Jack, I'll let you answer that because I'm not aware if the county holds a contingent fund for that exact purpose.
It does have insurance. We do have risk insurance for this. Will it cover that? No. We're talking a significant amount of funds. My colleague, Frank Johnson, who was the CIO in Baltimore, who actually is going to be speaking to our advisory commission on tomorrow night to talk about his stories and what happened in Baltimore. They're already north of $50 million in terms of the amount of money they've had to spend to be able to recover. They've hired a full-time communications agency that supports them day in and day out, just in case something happens. Would we go to that extent? It'd be that's something to consider, but that's a lot of money for that. Insurance just won't cover it. I mean, you could take as much insurance as you want out, depending, you know, how do you want to pursue this? I know Aaron Miller, who's head of emergency management, and myself have had long discussions on this. You know, what is our stance if we are impacted? And it's a difficult one. There's no easy answers. So I wish I could say that, you know, taking a policy out that would cover us for long term would be the answer, and wouldn't have to worry about putting money into the CIP. That certainly would address some of it, but it's pretty significant.
Okay, I would like to know more about this because I believe that we all are really concerned about, you know, what happens if, and you know, as some say, it's not an if, it's when, and how broad the damage will be, etc. And I really appreciate your preemptive philosophy here. I'm not saying that that this won't work. I'm just want to be sure that we have a plan B in case that it doesn't. The second thing is very, very short. I have also a different question, a general question. So we, at some point, we decided that the software environment that Arlington County works is mostly provided by Microsoft, right? So is there a point in time where we reassess this kind of decisions? I perfectly understand that these are not easy decisions, that they have to go for a long time because the entire enterprise is, you know, but now I see that we are investing in more software products and more combined and interconnected platforms. We are, you know, changing the way we work. So is there a point in time where we evaluate how well you know, the operating system choice or the software environment works for us?
It's continuous, persistent. The changes happen every day, and new things that we're coming upon that have value and of interest, and we're continually monitoring that. We do our best to hold Microsoft accountable. Frankly, this is not the relationship is not two friends. We're basically they're providing services to us, and they have to deliver those services in the fashion we want. So we're continually watching that. When somebody does come up that we could look at and say this is somebody we could go with, we'd certainly be open to that. The truth of the matter is, though, if you come down to it, we had this discussion with schools early on. Is Google a better product than staying with Microsoft? And to this day, the world-class software is Microsoft. And they've just made that statement in terms of desktops and product that they offer. But it changes. You know, and every day you got to be aware that there's a new provider out there. And I think our secret's been, and I hope I'm right, will continue, whoever takes my job here, is that we got to be adaptable and agile enough to say, okay, here's something better. And we got to be willing to stop and say, you know what, it was a good idea for a period of time, but now we maybe need to reconsider and go in a different direction. Saying that takes a lot. I mean, you're talking about major investment. You're talking about changing people's minds, and the first reaction is going to be why now? And it's that continual observation. I think we're fortunate here that you've got a great team behind me who are always asking those questions as well. So you're right. Is there one point in time? It could be any time. It could be tomorrow that we see something that really is something that we ought to really consider, and we'll bring forth to the manager and say we got to stop and think about this.
We don't prohibit any particular operating system or vendor. I mean, on the desktop, we're primarily Microsoft. We have a fair amount of Apple, and we also have some Chromebooks. On the hosted application side, we also have some open system software out there. So we're not preempting any particular vendor. It's just that a lot of them already support the application space at Microsoft. As you move more to the cloud, you get a little bit more of a mix on the back end, but the desktop is still ruled by Microsoft and Apple.
A perfect example is what we're doing right now, Teams. There's a lot of argument to say, why don't we use Zoom? Why don't we use WebEx? Why don't we use somebody else? And we're continuing to evaluate that. Amazing developments taking place in Microsoft as regards Teams. And so every time we're ready to say, let's consider something else, we see a new development coming forward that makes it significantly different to do what Ms. Crystal was talking about. And how do you create an environment where you basically bring in people both here and away, and you integrate them totally. And right now, Microsoft is the player in video conferencing. They're moving along. Could that change? Most certainly could. But that's where we would say, okay, there's something immediate. We could say, as long as you can integrate with Microsoft, maybe we use something different. Maybe we go in a different direction, and Zoom is the way to go. But that's been a constant discussion that's gone on here as well.
Thank you. I'm just conscientious of the fact that, you know, you lock into a system philosophy and type of integration, etc. This has at the end also not only performance implications, it has also economic implications. When you're locked in, you have less choice. You know, I'm happy to hear that we are a little bit more open and we try to integrate with other software products as well. Speaking of which, last and short question. At the end of your presentation, you mentioned an assessment, a new database for assessments, or a new tool to run a real estate assessment. Can you just say two or three things how this is different to what we do today?
The system that we have today was mostly homebrewed between 20 and 25 years ago in parts. Since that time, there are been a lot of changes in the actual real estate types and the complexity of the calculations that need to be done. Actually, Maria Meredith is on. Maria, can I tap you for a second to tell us about that?
Sure. Some of the types of real property that we have that our department assesses are done outside the system currently, because the system we have doesn't have the capability to do that. We also hope to have a lot of new functionality in a new system to integrate with other systems, to better integrate with GIS and land records. We may even do a joint venture with land records in the courts to look at, we're doing an RFI to potentially look at integrating and buying one product instead of two.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Hearing the discussion about and thinking about the various malware attempts and software security issues, we know how much is at stake in the work that you do, and appreciate it. For my part, the biggest area that I'll be continuing to look at going forward is I'm along the lines of one of the questions that a couple of us have had about commissions. That hybrid investment is really of interest to me. We're also going to need to do probably some changes in state law in Richmond in order to have the flexibility we want. But thank you to you, Mr. Stranitzky and Mr. Belcher and Mr. Bayless, Mr. Herlihy, David Herlihy, Mr. Pisano, and all of the team that work with you. We know how important by even our meeting today, how important your work is. And so just very grateful. I don't have any other questions. Want to give us back a little bit of time. We will have certainly the number of things stacked up for the CIP in this area next year is significant. But we appreciate your time and work. Mr. Schwartz, I don't know if you had anything to close. Colleagues, I believe we're all set to adjourn. So today, the gavel is just out of reach, so I'll use just a simple gavel. With that, colleagues, we are adjourned for today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.